for everyone. Then the third one is creating walkable localities. I wish we had many of those. Instead of sitting in our homes, we could probably walk around a little bit at least. Fourthly, preserving and developing open spaces. Fifth is promoting a variety of transport options. Sixth is making governance citizen friendly and cost effective. Seventh is giving an identity to the city. And lastly is applying smart solutions to infrastructure and services and area-based development. After reading this and then seeing the topic of today, that post-COVID, I changed the meaning of smart cities. And I, with apologies to Mr. Sandeep Goswami and Mr. Bipin Shah, I don't know what they will have to say about it. According to me, smart would now henceforth mean S in the smart would stand for sustainability and rejuvenation. We'll need to make everything sustainable. Second, the M would stand for management of waste to wealth. We should not be generating so much waste, least of all plastics, and even the other waste. Do you all know in Japan, they are a zero waste country. So they produce no waste. Whatever waste they produce, they recycle it, or they have a machine which breaks it down and composts it, everything. So that's my M. A is for accessibility and affordability. I believe that there should be a lot of accessibility for whether it's physically handicapped, whether it's children, whether it's elderly, for to all these spaces possible. Also, affordability. It should all the open spaces and all the places like malls and etc. should be available, should be possible for everybody to be affordable to go to them. So even parks and museums, there should not be like crazy amount of fees which can't go. So according to me, the A stands for accessibility and affordability. The R stands for rejuvenation of nature and renewable energy. We've all seen that with cars being off the roads for 40 days, Mumbai is already experiencing bluer skies. We can see the lovely stars at night, and it's so lovely, really. I mean, the beautiful sunsets we are getting to see, people are posting pictures on the social media all the time. So I believe the R stands for rejuvenation of nature, and renewable energy should be used so that there's less pollution. There should be no flying days. That means every airline should be made to not fly their fleet for 2 days in a month, maybe. Similarly, today you see the skies without any aircrafts in the sky, and that also must be helping. Similarly, the cars also being off the roads has helped tremendously. So we can have electric cars, and of course we need to get the infrastructure in place for that. And lastly, the T in smart, the T in my smart stands for transport, rapid, massive, and comfortable. So what I mean by that is we were just speaking before this meeting that how today we are planning to open up our cities without public transport. Now, why is that? Because it's so sad. We have one rail network which has been serving us since donkey's years, transporting 10 million people every day up and down, and it's absolutely crowded chock-a-block. Of course, now our government is doing infrastructure projects of the coastal road, of the metro, and God willing, that will help us. But having said that, transport, rapid transport and comfortable transport, anywhere in the world, it is said which country is considered developed. That country is considered developed where the rich and a middle class use the same mode of transport to get to work. You go to UK, you'll see the richest of the person and the normal the boss and the worker going in the same train, same subway to work. So that is what is a developed city, according to me. So with these few opening remarks, as I said, I feel that the smart should convert to this smart, and hopefully we can lead better lives and better cities and better days ahead. So with these few words, Anandbhai, I hand over to you to please take the floor.
Thank you, President, for your opening remarks and giving a name to the acronym SMART. Thanks very much. As you know, the topic, we have two very illustrious speakers, Mr. Sandeep Goswami and Mr. Bipin Shah, who are talking to us today. The talk for today is broken up into two parts. The first part will be taken up by Mr. Sandeep Goswami, who will talk about, his experiences, his ideas, his thoughts on, but I think his area of focus will be industrial smart cities and how climate change and resilience we need to be and how we need to gear up for the future. Followed by Mr. Bipin Shah, who will talk about his experiences in the clusters, the industrial clusters. He's been active He was just mentioning he's been in the Navi Mumbai area for almost 50 odd years. And he'll talk about the readiness to climate change and, in this pandemic world, how we are going to look at. I must say that 40% of India is scheduled to open on Monday in the green zones, and we are hopeful that more and more stuff, and we can contain this virus as we speak along, as we go along. Starting with our first speaker, Mr. Sandeep Goswami. Now, Mr. Goswami is a certified climate science and policy professional. He is PhD honors. He's done his sustainability from TERI, and he has qualifications in climate science from the World Bank Institute of Global Environmental Strategies, Japan. He has been a consultant advising on the UN SDGs and on smart cities. Among his most notable achievements is the engagement with Intel to promote excellence for good governance, ethics, and transparencies. The Smart City CDX tax in Smart Cities Pan India. He's a regular speaker at various universities and conferences and has written many an article. I'll leave the floor to now Mr. Sandeep Goswami to speak. I would request if he can limit himself to about 40 to 40. He needed 45 minutes, but he can do 35 to 40 minutes. It would be nice, so that after which we'll have Mr. Bipin Shah speak, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. I'll introduce Mr. Bipin Shah once he comes to speak. Over to Sandeep.
Thank you, sir. Before I begin, I would like to speak to Mr. Chairman and tell him that the smart cities, when it was devised and when Pune was done, the idea of smart cities got a little hijacked. I'll be sharing my screen and trying to, the whole idea over here is to first educate the industry what climate change and why this pandemic. Most of the problems, what happens is people go too technical at the areas where they're not explaining to the industries that what is there, what they need to know. It is more like a horoscope prediction. So if you are able to understand and you know where to find the data from, it is more like predicting what you do in a stock market, and you would know what you need to do before a calamity or a contagion hits you next time. My whole idea over here is to make people understand what the problem is and to understand it at a language which is easier than usually what we hear in the COP, which is the highest level of climate science, which is not always possible for the industries to follow or even document. And therefore, they look for people, if they can just drill it down and bring it to something where they can utilize and use it. The whole idea over here is that I have tried to make them into similar small chapters so that you can understand what I'm trying to say. And then later on, with that knowledge, you can create your own SOPs for the future and carry on with business as usual. As Mr. Anand Singhania said, that I will be looking at industrial township. If you would just pause for a minute and look at today, the declared orange, green and red zones, had we not forgotten to create this kind of zoning earlier, where the industry, the residential, the commercial and the institutional of a single area remains in a single place instead of people migrating from various distances to reach and work, we would still be functioning. And this integrated city, we had started with Rourkela, Bokaro, Bhilai steel plants, and somewhere down the line we forgot about them. We forgot about integrated cities. Today, with climate change, what is happening is that we have to relook at those integrated cities, relearn from them, and only add the science of climate change to that, so that we can create a climate resilient integrated smart city. And my talk is based on that. I'll be sharing my screen by muting my, switching off my camera.
Okay, sir, you can start.
Yeah, I'm doing that. Just give me 1 minute. I'm just doing that. Give me a minute. Is the screen shared?
No, it's still your icon. I've given you all permissions from my end.
Yeah, okay, fine. But I'm not able to do that for some reason. Yeah, okay. Are you able to see now?
Yeah, now.
Yeah, it's loading.
It's loading.
It
Yeah.
started.
Yeah. Can you put it on the presentation mode, sir?
I'm doing that, ma'am, please. Hold.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So the whole idea we are talking about right now, the contagion, that is the pandemic COVID-19, and everybody is focused in it. And we have forgotten that the global climate change is still on, and we will be facing the calamities which are there. So how does the industry, how do societies address calamity and contagion together? What are the SOPs which we need to do? The whole idea is to explain it in that manner. I will try and talk about the calamity with a small video presentation so that I would have, but I will see if I can get the time later on, because now that we do not have 45 minutes, and I will directly start with my chapters. So the first chapter is climate change, the cause and the effect. So what happens essentially is, why we are having climate change, it was always a natural thing. The atmosphere, the vegetation, the ice, the land and the oceans, they have always had changes. Whenever there were changes to the plate tectonics, we have read it in our school that we have the 7 continents which keep on moving. So whenever there have been these movements have been there, there has been a change in the climate system, and it has affected all the 5 systems. There have been changes in the sun strength. We understand solar flares and so on and so forth. And thankfully, right now, the amount of sunlight which we are getting, we are still in the ice age. And yes, we are in the ice age, because if all the ice would melt, there will be no landmass left. And the last is the change in the Earth's orbit. Science has found that in the last 8 lakh years, we have actually had devastation 8 times. Usually what happens, the sun, the Earth which rotates, while it revolves, starts to stop rotating in every 25,000 years. And we see the changes in the atmosphere, in the ice, the vegetation and the ocean and the surfaces. And it takes another 75,000 years to catch a new orbit and spin again in a new axis. Now, all these things which take that kind of a time, as I said, 25,000 years for happening. The last ice age to today, it has just increased by 4 degrees over a period of 10,000 years to give you the cryosphere and the ocean which we see today. Cryosphere is the atmosphere and the land together, and the ocean, that's how we speak. And the oceans today, it took 10,000 years to happen. What we have done is, we have been able to achieve exactly that kind of climate change in only the industrial start and till date of industrial revolution. So that is why it is called a human-induced global warming. You please need to remember that there are the circulations which we are showing over here, that the Earth is a single system, and everything that happens, whatever happens in one area, the force of it will have an effect, and cause will give an effect in some other areas. So we are actually not separate; it is a single unitary mass. So now what you would see over here was the cyclones which happened. You can see this is cyclone Fani happening. At that time, there was a cyclone, before it hit us, there was a cyclone in Japan, there was a cyclone in the Far East, and there was a cyclone happening here. Now, this kind of disturbances which you can see in the global atmosphere is happening as we are speaking right now. And why they have happened, when the NASA has mapped the surfaces, we have seen that there are global atmospheric changes in the air due to pollution, and there is an air circulation mismatch over the oceanic areas. And what we have also been able to achieve is that we have been able to slow down the ocean currents, which is the Gulf Stream current, which is the start point of every type of weather, winter, summer, monsoons happens because of these ocean currents. We have been able to meander it. And because we have been able to meander it, and we found this in last May 2019, by December, January, we all know that Europe had blizzards to such an extent that you had to stop your flights and so on and so forth. You can see that what had happened is, because of this meandering, the tight Arctic Circle, Antarctic Circle, tropic, equator, that we have those tight bands of atmospheric zones, they have got disrupted. And these disruptions are going to cause problems. Industries and businesses, if they can understand climate science, and if they are able to know that what are going to happen, they can plan in advance their shipments, their meetings, everything they can come to know, whether if they know that there are going to be changes in the weather system which can impact their businesses. So when we look at this over here, what is here? This is as good as a Nostradamus prediction. This is the latest what the science has given us in the COP26 in 2019. This was the report which was created and submitted. And what we are able to see is that the scale and cross-boundary dimension of changes in the ocean and cryosphere challenge the ability of communities, cultures, and nations to respond effectively within the existing governance framework. And we have a very high confidence that we are actually into a lot of problems. And these evidences have come from that they are caused by human causes of climate warming. So what we need to do, societies will be exposed and challenged to adapt to change in the ocean and the cryosphere, even if current and future efforts of reducing the greenhouse emissions to keep the global warming below 2 degrees happens. So even if we are talking about sustainable goals today, what we have already created, those impacts are not going to go down anywhere anytime soon. Now people are not able to understand what is 2 degrees. To explain 2 degrees in a global scale, I would only say that you consider a global GDP fall in the share market by 2% or 5%. Now you can understand what is the impact it will happen. Now if you are looking at a financial market, which is a creation of the humans, and we understand the pandemonium it creates, what a 2 degree in a global situation in a climate can do. It will actually erode not just 2% of your global GDP, but 20% and above. Now, what you are talking about the climate impact on business and body. Essentially, this, if you would see, we are most of the business are into extraction, resource extraction, and then it becomes a commercial activity. This creates an atmospheric feedback where we are having the marine ecosystem, the sea ice, the ocean circulation, the freshwater system, the snow and the frozen ground, the terrestrial ecosystem, everything starts getting impacted. And what happens, it directly affects the local and the indigenous people, which creates international cooperation as we are seeing right now, and also international frictions. These things are completely mapped, and scientific evidences are there that whatever we are doing are having these kind of effects. The direct effect has been mapped, and we are able to see that whenever we are doing a physical change in the land, the cryosphere, that is the land and the atmosphere, water availability, landslide, avalanches, fire and subsidence happen. It direct affects these services of human, tourism, infrastructures, migrations, cultural services. They directly get impacted. And we have been able to get a lot of confidence in certain areas that these things are sure shot happening by mapping these areas. When we have mapped the ocean, again we have seen that there are temperature changes, there is oxygen and the acidic level changes. They are directly affecting the ecosystem. And what happens to the businesses? Fisheries, tourism, habitats. We know if you're talking about a tsunami or what you're talking about a hotel or whatever, everything starts getting impacted in the business side when you are having a problem in the oceans. It also affects the human. What will extreme heat do? Today, if we are looking at a temperature which by May, June is expected to reach an average of 45 to 47 degrees in the plateau area, the work like infrastructure services, works like building of real estate, where you need people to go out there and work. Even for farming, people need to go out and work. It will not be possible unless the industry starts innovating. Now, if you start innovating and use machines for that, then what do you do with the employment of the people? So there is a whole lot of scenarios which you need to understand, and industries need to understand, and then only they will be able to go ahead. We already know what outdoor air quality is doing. We already know what flooding is doing. This was already indicated that vector-borne diseases will start to impact, and this is directly from the melting of the permafrost. We are going to see much more new vector-borne diseases, which the World Bank and the World Health Organization have always been warning. Water-related infections. Now, every time there is a flooding, and if it floods an urban area, You are looking at your computer, your laptop, your paints and varnishes and your petrol and everything that creates a deadly cesspool within the water, goes into your groundwater system, goes into your river system, goes into your ocean system, and they come back to you on a food chain. So you get food related infections. And then they also create mental health problems, and overall well-being also gets impacted. If you are going to fall more ill, then your impact to the industry where you are not able to go and do your work, it affects the outcome as the output of the industry is also reduced. Now this is the summation of the total thing, that by 2030, as I explained, 2 degree, we are expecting a 4 degree rise. We have just reached 1.2, 1.5, 1.6 degrees right now. If we reach 4 degree, what would happen? And we hope that we don't go that side. But even if we are looking at a temperature of that much, it was already predicted 2 years or 3 years ago that we will look at 250,000 deaths by diseases. It was already predicted that there will be 7 million deaths by air pollution. We are looking at losses per annum of 2 to 4 billion. We are talking about hunger and famine, and we are also talking about vector-borne diseases. That is your malarias and viruses. This was already predicted by the WHO. Now people would say, we have got so much time by 2030, but you need to understand that you open a tap, your bucket does not fill immediately. It starts filling up. So if you are looking at a timeline of 10 years, please understand those people who live in Mumbai, that you might be visiting the Taj Hotel, and the last year when you have visited it, you have already crossed 118 years. So 100 years is a touching distance for you. So therefore, from 2030, when you go to 2050, we are looking at Mumbai, a loss of about $6.5 billion annually. Kolkata is about 3.2 billion, and by 2070 we are looking at Mumbai at $11.4 million, so $1.6 trillion of asset losses and human impacted by 11.4 million, while Kolkata will be 14 million human impacted and a 2 trillion losses. So we cannot afford these kind of things, and these are the things which we start to do, because an industry is like a huge oil tanker. It has got its own legacy issues. If we start to plan now, then only we can turn the ship. And the whole idea is to tell you that what is there, to understand from this and make your plans for the future.
Sandeep ji, can I request you to go to the previous slide and just make it a little bit wider for that part about vulnerable part of cities? So that's a very important table, and it's too small for us to see it the way it is.
Sir, I will share this at a later date. Is that okay?
Okay. Go ahead.
So I will share those slides, not a problem. Impacts and risks. Now this was a 2018, every time we took a 20-year, the UN took a 20-year mapping, and we looked at the DRR, the disaster risk reduction, which is the UN DRR LV comes out, and we looked at India, which was the top 5 countries of the world with an absolute lot of $80 billion. Now we are working 18 hours a day, 12 hours a day, and we are not able to make enough money. We need to know where those monies are going, because every time there is going to be a pandemic or an epidemic or a calamity, the money is going to go towards the social causes, and you are not going to see profits. So you need to understand that if you need to have, you don't need to save the land, you don't need to save the water for anything else. You need to, a builder needs to save the land, because if he does not save the land, where does he build? Similarly, FMGC, if he does not save the farms, how does he get his product? So you need to be a little more selfish in understanding that your businesses are going to impact if you're not going to go and understand what is the risks which are impacting. Mumbai and Kolkata have been marked as one of the best. So when we are talking about Mumbai and Kolkata, please understand it is throughout the coastline that is going to get impacted. And what are the impacts? We are going to look at high temperatures, we are going to look at heavy precipitations, we are going to look at drought, and we are going to look at soil fertility loss and flooding. Please understand that if you are going to see a high summer in any given year, you must write it down that you will be getting flood. Because we all know that when we bake clay, then it becomes a teacup. It becomes a non-porous substance. Similarly, when the sun bakes the soil, it becomes non-porous. So the normal monsoon which would come does not percolate, and it converts into a flood. And what it also does, it just removes the fertile soil and goes away. So you are again, the FMGC industries and other industries, they get impacted. And the whole cycle of sales of everything, because we are still an agrarian nation, everything gets impacted other than the health risks. Now, this was a beautiful graph. It is when the warnings have been being given for a long time. This is a 10-year-old graph, and as you can see, if you would look at it, that the graph shows from 1940s to 2010 that the incidence of climate impacts started becoming much more. While we are going towards 2020, 2010, the impacts are becoming much more. And if you would look at the World Bank, which had published this, the table over here. I'm sorry, I'm not able to increase the scale over here, but I will again share this. That if you are talking about an estimated loss in a 100-year return period, what climate scientists are able to do for industries are they are able to tell you that, boss, if you are going to put your industry over here, or if you have an industry or your business over here, what is going to impact you in the next 100 years? What is going to impact you in the next 250 years based on the climate data that is available? So what we are looking over here is that we are looking at 64.2 US million loss in insured, and uninsurable is about 444. So that is a huge amount of money which you are going to look at if you are talking about if you calculated a 1% DP. Now, if you look at what has actually happened in Asia, we had a $10.4 million insurance, and it could have insured about 47.5. That is the kind of loss we have. Now, banking and insurance, if they know this data, they know what instruments to create. Industries know what are the things they need to insure, and therefore be able to survive these extreme events. This is what happened in 2019. In 2019, we had a temperature which was an average of 45 degrees. And these are the places like Nagpur and in Jaipur and all, we reached 49 degrees, and Churu we reached 50 degrees. So this is the kind of map which happened in 2019. When we look at groundwater, we are all reading that Chennai didn't have water. We are already seeing that the groundwater depletion is happening. So if you are having consultants who are climate scientists and you are into a textile industry, you are into food, you are into any industry, you need water. If you know that which district is going to lose the groundwater, you know how you have to plan ahead. Immediately what happened that the same year, the amount of rainfall that fell and the kind of flooding that it created is absolutely you are able to see. And then by the year 2021 to 2050, we can see that these are the brown patches where there will be no groundwater left. We are already, so if the industries are aware that what is the impact, the industry prepares now. So you have enough time to prepare between now to 2050 for what your future industry should do in terms of sustainability and goals. Now, if you would look at where we are today, the dangerous situation which we have created for ourselves, if you look at this, 250 million lives live within 50 kilometers of the coast of India. This is a 2014 data where we are talking about settlements of 1,262 settlements, structures 1,023, existing ports 143, and proposed ports were 76. This was within 500-meter zone. Within a 10-kilometer zone, we had power plant existing 27, and there was a proposed power plant of about 59. Now we see this side, we know the wind and cyclone hazard map. Having known the wind and cyclone hazard map, industries should be knowing that how they should plan those hazards and be able to mitigate them. Because if you are going to go at those, the extreme climate events, if they are going to continuously increase, then you need to know where you need to go. And that is why if you look at the government of India, the golden quadrilateral which Mr. Gadkari is trying to create at a pace which is unimaginable, the four parts from Mumbai to Delhi, the DMIDC, then the Delhi-Kolkata, the Kolkata-Chennai, then the Chennai-Bangalore via Mumbai, are the areas which are the future where you can talk about creating your new areas if you need to shift. Now this is an example of Slicolor Vayu. Blissfully, last year, when it became the most strong, it was already turning away from the coast of India and just kissing Gujarat and going away. Now, if you look at the Gujarat map, you have the seismic map and the cyclone and tsunami map, and you could know that what would have been the impact of this area had the cyclone entered. So what policy planners at national and subnational level, along with the industry, should do is that they should do a definite risk assessment of data of time, probability, occurrence, and the degree of potential hazard that different infrastructures are going to get, and be able to plan for the new infrastructure or retrofit. That is the most important thing right now, retrofit the existing ones. Now, this gentlemen is a simulation, this is not real, but this was again so that if Vayu would have, or any cyclone would have turned towards Mumbai and Maharashtra, what would have been the impact of that at a slow moving? We would have seen a 620 million insurable loss and 177 billion of uninsurable losses. And what we did is that we took the analogous footprint of the 2005 flood, we mapped it, and we looked at from 9 meter to 1 meter how the flood is going to impact Mumbai. So you can understand that the infrastructures, how they would have got impacted. Now knowing this, you have time tomorrow to do what you need to do to safeguard your assets. This is beautifully explained again. We know that by 2030 and rising from 2030 to 2050, we are going to see these areas to be very, very flood prone. And now if you look at the development density from 2000 to 2016, the government, the industries are not looking at these kind of maps enough to know that what they should plan when they are building it in areas which are already prone to flooding. So your assets, flood is not a major thing. I will like to tell you that if you look at Denmark, Denmark is below sea level. So if you know technology can solve your problems, but you need to know them. Then the resilience strategies, the adaptation and mitigation. Now what the industry should do, it should recognize the problem, and they should start framing their own SOPs. And while they are framing their SOPs, there should be innovation, because it will not always be an institutional fit, while it should be an institutional fit also within their sector. And it should also have an enabling socio-political setting, because you have to work with everybody, you have to take everybody to participate with you. So the general strategy for enhancing the socio-ecological resilience is a timestamp, where you have to broaden the participation, you have to maintain the diversity and the redundancy. What is redundancy? Today what you know as knowledge, tomorrow science will show that that may not be the truth, something else has happened. So you must be able to immediately be able to change. And you have to create that, foster the complex ecosystem of understanding, and the understanding has to be in all levels of management. And then you have to have the connectivity so that the top management and the last man down the line are able to interact in a manner where you are able to get real-time feedbacks. And that is when businesses which are getting impacted can take immediate effect. Now we will explain what are the way we can do adaptation. But before, adaptations are to reduce the hazards. That is the ecosystem, the mangroves, the water reservoirs, the vulnerability, the social protection, the livelihood diversification, the insurance solutions have to be created, the hazard proofing, housing and infrastructure has to be created. Then you have to take actions on to reduce the exposure. So if you know that we have coasts which are getting threatened, then you have to know that what are the retreat and the resettlement plan which you need to do from now. You need to know the risk sensitivity of the land which you are going to use tomorrow, or what you are using right now, by planning what you need to do. And you have to create an early warning system for evacuation of that. But as you can see, there is a limit to adaptation, because beyond a point, the nature is much more stronger than the human. So your hazards, there is a boundary beyond which you cannot limit the risks. For that, what you need to do, you have to take a three-pronged action. The three-pronged actions is where we are talking about mitigation and adaptation. So mitigation, adaptations on two sides, and supporting the biological and ecological adaptation is the understanding what we have normally done in our construction and in our industry. We see a land, we know that you have to bring a couple of civil engineers, you have to just level that land. We do not understand the biodiversity, we do not understand that the land, the architects are, that in architecturally it is possible to use the land in the way it is, because they affect, if you level off a land, if you level off the mountains, if you fill up the ponds and lakes, the forcings of nature is going to give you a bounce back. So then comes the informed opportunities. What are the informed opportunities? Now, if you, as you would know, the Sustainable Development Goals, it's a 24.7 trillion business opportunity in the next 10 years. And 2.5 trillion of that business opportunity lies right here with us. So like hospitals, if you're talking about good health and all, education, talking about smart cities, here, the chairman, sir, was talking about some smart cities. I would like to just explain that what had happened is the smart cities, with the way we had designed, was for goal 9 and 11, that it had to be innovative in their infrastructure and planning, and it had to be sustainable cities for the communities. But what happened is that everything leaned towards goal number 8, that is creating good jobs and economic growth. So what you see as a smart city today is that in an app, you are able to see that there are so many coronaviruses, and in the app you will see that you are going to get flooded, but nobody is going to save you from that flood. So that is where what has happened. It has become more on the economic side rather than what it should have happened. Now people have understood that, and as of 2019 COP26, what we are seeing is that while the policymakers are doing something, but they are zero on the climate funds. A lot of promises, nothing is happening on the climate fund side, right from the Obama, Copenhagen, nothing much has happened. But the private sector, if you see, there is a lot of hope in the private sector. From the OECD countries, there is a lot of hope, there is a lot of funding that is coming. And there is a blip in the radar, even in the private equity, venture capital and infrastructure funds. Where is the money coming? Excuse me? Is somebody saying something? Okay, so what happens is if you look at the adaptation of finance, here the businesses can understand where you can put your money. Water and wastewater management, agriculture, forest and land use and natural resource management, disaster risk management and cross-sectoral, infrastructure, energy and other built environment has been in the adaptation. Look at the mitigation, again low carbon transport, which was again being spoken in the beginning of the year. Renewable energy generation, energy efficiencies. And look at this, agriculture is on both sides. There is no other place but agroforestry where you can have a profit which is up to 800%. Like if you are looking at certain biofuel producing plants, you place those trees on the land which industries usually buy for expansion. Let that tree grow for the next 30 years, 20 years when you are not really expanding, and they are going to give you biofuel which you are able to use. 40,000 rupee expense and 1 acre of land gives you 6,000 liters of biofuel in a year. And you know the price of petrol. And then you look at the return on your investment. So there are beautiful ways that industries can then what happen, recoup the losses which they will be facing from other regions because of climate impacts. Now this is the kind of encouraging money which the OECD countries are showing. The way the climate, I will not dwell too much on the finance aspect of it, lack of time, I want to show something else. But as you can see, it is continuously growing. So there is a push, people are understanding, and after the pandemic, people are really going to more and more understand. Europe, America, they are going to look at India, they are going to look at Make in India. This is the time where the Indian industry needs to gear up and talk to them and try and create those industries with participation with them, which is there. So what is the post-COVID-19 solution? See, if you understand the world over, we have 60% of areas which needs to be urbanized. But now after understanding this, people are not going to urbanize the way you are talking about. But even then, there is a $4.5 trillion per annum investment which is there, which is required. But if you make it climate resilient with a premium of 9 to 27%, there is a lot of things that are going to happen. So industrial towns, which are how we do it and where it affects, is a very simple thing. Say, look at agriculture and food processing. Now, if you create an agriculture and food processing or an automotive and automobile company, banking and a cement, each as a cluster with having their own people who are staying there as residential, and then you are giving the rest of the infrastructures with food and everything there, then a pandemic does not close down an industry. You are able to, in catastrophic, when the financial well-being of a company are getting impacted, you don't get impacted. And therefore, you need to talk with consultants who have knowledge, who can incorporate that climate science to your overall business planning. and to make it a very comprehensive worldview so that insurers, reinsurers, if you look at the coast of Puri, today no bank, no insurer would like to insure a hotel over there, because you never know if the next 10 years you are going to see another cyclone Fani. So understanding that makes a lot of sense, and you can see that you can institutions like Indian Merchant Chamber can talk to all industries together, look at their existing businesses, look at their extra land which are there right now, and do something where they can immediately start, and they do not fall under these conditions which they are right now, which is a lockdown. So this is how we have explained it. We have taken the urban design aspects, the biophysical features, the socio-cultural features, and the ecological imperatives. And what we have talked about is that existing structures can be disaster risk reduced, or DRR. So when you look at this, what we was being talked, that it can be walkable, it can be accessible, it can be safe, it can be resource efficient, and there will be a less damage reduction. Your air can be clean and safe. You can be healthy. The soils can be healthy. The material, which are the resources, there is zero waste. So you can be responsible over there. And the lower down, you can see it can be healthy. It can have a carrying capacity will be low impact. What happens usually is that we cram up people per square foot. But there is a science. The urban planning people always knew that science, that there is a carrying capacity. So you should not go beyond the carrying capacity. Even if you want to expand, you need to expand scientifically. Like if you are building something in 100 acre as an integrated township, you need to build again, then make another one completely close to, next to it, but another 100 acre, which is complete in itself. If you try to cram it up, you will face what Mumbai is facing today, what all the metro cities are facing today. This has always been told, and this is how it happens. So I will just show you that the warnings had always been there. Just a second. By showing you a couple of things. The government of India in 2017, if you look at this area, I will just expand it a little more. The National AIDS and STD Control Program and Mission Indradhanush. We were already talking over here that by 2030 end epidemics, neglected tropical diseases. We were talking about diseases through strengthening the prevention and treatment of just one more here. Universal health coverage, financial risk protection. So we were already, India already was talking about it, because why we came to know that we are going to see these things. You look at this, 3.9. Substantially reduce the number of deaths and illness from hazardous chemical, air, water and soil pollution and contamination. We are already seeing in 3 years after this was written, that we are facing this. So the governments were already seized about it. The industries need to know that what is there so that they could have planned. I will show you another evidence of the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization, in the managing epidemics, they have come up and they showed this is what has happened in the last 10 years. These are the kind of, the planet was already giving us every 2 years, 5 years average, it was giving us that these are the kind of epidemics happening all over the world. We need to plan, but we were not listening. We were not listening to the science which was already out there. Similarly, if you look at the World Health Organization anticipating epidemics, they came out with this paper. And what are they writing over here? Close collaboration between health experts and meteorologists, people who know climate science, for new anticipation for anticipating epidemics. Why you need to do this? For example, arrival of cloud, humid weather tends to trigger onset of influenza, while flooding encourages rapid spread of waterborne and rodent-borne diseases. So if you know these kind of things from the beginning, the warnings were already there. Somewhere down the line, the governments and the businesses did not know that they need to read this and they need to understand this. Even if you would look at this is something which is from the OECD countries. Look at what it says: future global shocks and pandemics. It was already given. The University of Pennsylvania already wrote it in 2011. The warning was there for the industries world over that you could have been able to prevent what we are going through. And then when we look at it, what it says over here,
Sandeep ji, if your presentation is over, if you can switch on your camera, then we can see you.
Yeah, your presentation is over, sir.
Just for a timing perspective, 5 more
I am
minutes.
done, sir. I am just showing that this is the only thing. I just last one line and I'm done. So what I am saying that if you would see, another deliberated issue was securitization of health. So we were not, it was told that do not talk about pandemic. It was already, so this report was there and it was being ignored. So essentially, my whole idea is that today, am I visible?
Yes, you can just stop sharing the screen, then only you will come up.
I have stopped sharing the screen.
Okay.
Yeah, I have stopped sharing the screen. Am I still there or no?
Yeah. Your screen is still shared. Okay, I have removed it. Now you can start, sir.
Yeah. So I am done with. I wanted to show the cyclone Fani here, but I will send that link to people who want to see it. It is important that one needs to see a cyclone, the kind of cyclone that has impacted our country, because when a cyclone comes, it hits your buildings with a force where you would see in this that it creates an electrical spark in a petrol station. It just blows it away. So you are going to not only see water, you are also going to see a hazard of fire. You are going to see a lot of things which you do not imagine. So knowing these things is important for the industries. And once you know it, what you need to do today is go back to your drawing boards, go back to your industry which you have, and plan a system so that you are able to create your own containment zone rather than sitting down in a red zone, orange zone, and a green zone. And you can do business as usual. So it is nothing which is impossible. What it needs is that it needs planning and it needs understanding at a very basic level. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Very interesting to know how the climate is affecting us. Degrees of temperature, which we may find can actually make such a sea change on the ground. There are many questions from the floor. We'll take all the questions at the end of the next presentation. So, present Mr. Bipin Shah. He's an old-time member of IMC and he's the president of the Thana Belapur Association. And I'm happy to know that he, along with his team, have been instrumental in starting over 60 units of manufacturing during COVID. Mainly in essential services and pharmaceutical with the various people in charge, and they have started their manufacturing in these times. So it's given to understand that they will continue during 4th May also. Now, Mr. Bipin Shah is a chemical engineer by qualification. He's the MD of Anu Pharma Limited, a leading bulk drug manufacturing company, and in various other group companies. And his group has been in pharmaceutical for over 85 years. And he has, as I mentioned, vast experience in pharma and with the businesses. So with this, I welcome Mr. Bipin Shah to please speak about, where he thinks the cluster, climate change, pandemic, and how he's been coping in these times. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anand. Thank you for this opportunity. I would like to divide my talk into two ways. First is to give you a little introduction of Thane Belapur Industries Association, the way the TTC area came into existence, and then followed by what are the requirements of a smart city and how work has been done by Thane Belapur Industries Association. So the way we listened to Mr. Goswami, it was more on the technical aspect. But on the floor, what exactly has happened in last, let us say, 55 years? Because it was somewhere in 1965 that the TTC MIDC area was evolved. And then starting from there, it's almost 55 years. So you'll be pleased to know that all the industrialists, small, medium, big, were attracted to go to Thane Belapur Road because it was nearest industrial estate, MIDC estate from Mumbai, number one. Secondly, it was the largest industrial belt in Asia at that time. So very big industrialists like Nosil, Polyolefins Industries, Pfizer, Herdilia, they took plots. Along with that, medium industries, even small industries, they started coming there. And MIDC was really, really very enthusiastic. They had provided for water, power, street lights, road, nicely provided by MIDC. Even the whole plan was that it was declared as a chemical zone. That means if you go from Thana to Belapur Road, that 24-kilometer belt, on the left side of belt, all the industries were allowed. And 1.9 kilometer from there, no residential was supposed to be coming there. This
request if you could just speak a little louder.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Audio
Sure.
very loud. Yeah.
So since 1965, it was very well planned industrial estate of MIDC. When you go from Thana to Belapur Road, that 24-kilometer belt, the entire left side was meant for starting industries. And then the right-hand side of the belt up to 1.9 kilometer, as per the chemical zone definition, no residentials or commercial premises were to come. This thing continued right up to 1973 when the Thana Creek Bridge was started. So again, communication links were better and the time of travel from Mumbai came down from 90 minutes to 45 minutes. As I said, very large units, chemical zone, they came up. And then everything was going well. The first pinch that we received was in 1978, when a lot of industrial relation problems started because of various militant trade unions. And that is how the birth of Thane Belapur Industries Association took place in 1978. That means today we are roughly 42 years young industrial organization. You'll be surprised that several things were done by Thane Belapur Industries Association in last 42 years.
Just a bit.
The first thing that we did was to make a survey of the railways. That means railways from Thane to Belapur and from Mankut to Belapur. At that time, somehow government was little reluctant on spending that kind of money for survey of railways. We provided a full-fledged report to the government that this is how the railways can be planned. And subsequently, the same survey report was used, and today you'll be pleased to know that the rail connections are there from Thana to Belapur as well as from Mankut to Belapur. This was one of the achievements that I consider a very important achievement. Another detail is that we have about 650 industrial units as our members. But you will be surprised to know that as of today, there are 1,900 MIDC plots on Thane Belapur Road. Out of that, practically 50% are not operating. How did I get this number? Because 1,900 plots are having water connection from MIDC. That means their water connection being live. But if you see actually number of units operating, it is about 850 only. Now, what is the reason that one may ask? The main reason is that there is no political will. Now that the Vashi township and the Navi Mumbai townships have come up, probably the government wants us to move to farther spaces and leave Thane Belapur Road, which according to me is not correct, because since the association came into picture in 1978, association was responsible for starting of common effluent treatment plant, emergency response station, there is a fire station, even a waste management treatment plant. We have even a meteorological laboratory. All these minimum requisites of a chemical zone are very nicely functioning on Thane Belapur Road. And now what we are lacking is government will. You'll be even surprised to know that amongst the entire Maharashtra, 2 times the common effluent treatment plant of TTC area has received a prize, the best prize for the best operating common effluent treatment plant. So, as I said, the government will is the main issue. Now imagine crores of rupees are invested by industries and by our association to create all these common facilities, as I mentioned, like common effluent treatment plant, fire station, etc., etc. And as per me, as per my feeling, even that MSME definition, which is eligible for several benefits from the government, that also needs to be changed, but it takes years and years to change that definition. The earlier definition is as old as 2006, where they had kept the definition as investment in plant and machinery up to 10 crores is only eligible to be considered for MSME. Mainly the middle scale, small scale limits are still lower. Now today, with all this audience that I have with me, they know that within 10 crores, you can't create a plant which is where the costs have gone up substantially high. From 2006 definition, today we are talking of 2020. A chemical plant, even a bulk drug small scale plant would need minimum 20 to 25 crores to have a startup. So these delays from the government are probably creating a lot of problems. Now coming to the second part of my talk, that what are the basic requisites for a industrial cluster or for a smart city? First is the seamless connectivity. As you know, that connections are very important. And the second is infrastructure, digital management of infrastructure. We have all the possibilities and all the things are in place. Online redressal of grievances pertaining to road, lighting, water supply, electricity. Regular meetings are going on with NMMC, MIDC, and excellent, I would say, excellent response from even the regulatory bodies. Third is healthcare. Now we have best of the hospitals, the Reliance Hospital, the DY Patil Hospital, so that is also comply. Then better clarity and coordination amongst the governing bodies like MIDC, NMMC, MSEDCL. I have been attending all the managing committee meetings as a president, and I tell you, the way the active associations can work, and we have list of the complaints with these facilities. Automatic billing generation, that is digital management, transportation. Now see the connectivity of Thane-Belapur road with Mumbai, Pune, Nasik, Gujarat is excellent. And this is still making it very eligible for a nice industrial cluster. Mobility. They are primary and the most important elements like civic duty towards the city and the country they live in makes the place a complete and developed nation. Sanitation, including solid waste management. Here also you see the way association has started TTCWMA, that is Trans Thana Creek Waste Management Association. It is also working very efficiently. So what are the initiatives that we have taken as an association? Emergency response station. The most important thing that we did, according to me, in last probably 35 years is the day there was a Bhopal gas incident in the country. Immediately after that, Thane-Belapur Industry Association took the initiative, and we are running a course of diploma in industrial safety, which is recognized by government of Maharashtra. And last 35 years, since 1985, these courses are conducted regularly, and about 380 students who come out from this course every year as a safety engineers, as fire engineers. And this activity is the most popular activity of Thane-Belapur Association. Even we have a meteorological observatory and laboratory where we are sending daily reports to the Indian Meteorological Department about relative humidity, wind velocity, rain measurement. We have regularly been measuring on the Comprehensive Environmental Pollution Index and sending it to MPCB, discussing with them. Continuous education training program. Very recently, just before the pandemic, we had Safety Week celebration, safety rallies. You'll be surprised to know that the way this association has worked, in last 15 years, we have planted 60,000 trees in various areas of Thane Belapur Road, conducting fire audits, on-job training, continuous education program. So a lot of things are done. Even if we go to the past, TBIA was responsible for telephone STD to local calls. Earlier, Mumbai to Navi Mumbai, there were STD calls which were very expensive. It was with the help of TBIA and a lot of perseverance that we could convert it to local calls. Continuous follow-up with the state government. One thing where we could not achieve in spite of a lot of hard work was industrial township. What we wanted is that we wanted to manage the entire industrial area by a committee which will be a few members from the government and a few members from the industry. Right up to the end, we were successful, but at the end, probably somehow we realized that again, what came in our way was the political way. A truck terminal, Trans Harbour Railway, NMMC city buses. If you see now, even in the internal areas of our industrial estate, everywhere bus connectivity is there and no workers or staff has any difficulty. Abolition of octroi. Even on the Thana Creek Bridge, when they raised the toll tax from 5 rupees to 2 rupees, 2 rupees to 5 rupees, I'm sorry, we studied everything and we realized that they cannot raise the toll tax like this because they had already covered the cost of the bridge, including the maintenance charges. The government was forced to refund the money which they had charged in the intervening period. So in my opinion, a lot of things required for the smart city or to make a cluster are readily available on Thane Belapur Road. Now government is talking that, okay, I am in pharmaceutical industry, I know that they are thinking of new clusters for active pharmaceutical ingredients. But what about the existing state structures where everything is available, the facilities are available? If they consider Thane Belapur Road as an industrial cluster for bulk drugs, they don't need to spend like 3,000 crore or 6,000 crore as they are planning. On one side, we have clusters which are readily available, which can be probably looked at with greater political will. On other side, they are thinking of creating new clusters at probably 5 times or 10 times higher price. So with this, probably my talk, the time that was given to me, and then I would welcome any questions that anybody has on Thane Belapur Road. I am here since 48 years, and probably I feel that the way the association is working, only if there is a political will, this area can excel like anything. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Bipin Bhai, for your discussion on what are the challenges you've been facing over the years and what's the ground reality on being climate ready and smart ready from our industrial point of view. Before I throw up the floor to the audience, and I see there are quite a few questions in the chat as well, I'd like to just share with a small video with you all to just give you an idea of maybe these are what's going to happen. This is so Selby, please enable my share.
Yeah, I have enabled.
Okay, thank you. Just starting it. No, no, it's not allowing me to. Anyway, let's proceed. Just exit it. It was a short video basically showing about how the how we are going to deal with contamination going forward. I have a question to the both, and I would request if Sandeep bhai, you could open your video so that we can see you as well. One of the challenges I think is that with this climate change and things, is going to be the steps we need to take uh, in India, in our industrial areas for to be, pandemic proof and climate proof. You had mentioned something about UVC lights. Could you elaborate on that point?
Yes, sir. Fundamentally, the changes which you need to do when you are talking about the contagion is that you need to understand that what we are doing today, we are using hydrochloroquine, which is a chlorine substance, and we are trying to use chemical substances. Chemical substances, if anybody coming from the industries would always know, that have always given in the long term, the impacts have never been good. Because when you're talking about using a chemical which is essentially a pesticide, which is going to kill something, and the random and the rampant use of it today, by saying that this is going to help us with COVID-19, if you would go and do a research, what you would find is that has been effective in SARS-CoV-2. And there is no research paper saying that this is effective to SARS-CoV-19. And yet we are spraying some million trillion liters of this chemical all over the world, and the surface runoff of it post monsoon, when it will concentrate, can create an environmental hazard which we are not aware of. Other than that, it is also corrosive substance, and we also know that in India, whatever the directives are, the people who are at the ground who are trying to do the solution mixing with water are not so scientifically accurate. They are not some IIT students, and the supervision is also always not correct. So what happens if the mixture is not done well? It is going to create a hazard. The second hazard, we are talking about using alcohol-based substance to rub on your offices, interiors, the switches and all. It would have a vapor situation, which in a closed area can have also a potential hazard. Now, other than that, what we can look into is that immediately our team, my team, in fact, has started creating both for industrial zones and commercials and residential, obviously, airlock systems, which we already know are something which have been used in the pharmaceutical industries, in the FMGCs, and try and see that if we can put UV and make those UV human friendly. There are UVGI available, which is not yet human friendly, but we are working on things actively with people who know about these matters, talking to the radiologists to see that we can create them as human friendly. Once they become human friendly, it can go into your AC ventilation ducts. You can design it in a manner that it can remain in your office in a way that even if you are not keeping that social distancing, at least most of the viruses and pathogens are getting killed immediately. And it is nothing that you need to refill and fill and refill, because usually a light bulb does not fuse in a day. And moreover, there is no chance of contamination. Like, you don't know that when you read a report on the substances, they are saying that if a person just ingests this much per small percentage, he does not die. But what happens if a person has to continuously go in and come out, go in and come out? What is going to be to his lung? How it is going to infect? It is after 10 years, 5 years, you come up with a report, oh, we are sorry, it does not help the industry. Because the industry is going to lose. If you look at the corrosive agent about it, if you are spraying it on your product, your furniture, your furnishing, and it starts corroding, who is going to take care of that? Who is going to pay money for that? That needs to be understood. Today, your bombil and your bacon both are getting contaminated come monsoon, and you are going to ingest it. So these are the health hazards which needs to be understood. So therefore, UV light is a better substance, and I am 100% sure that if given the knowledge, the way I spoke today, there are industries which will come up with innovative ideas and be able to come up with things which are going to create a better impact and as well as a business opportunity for everybody concerned.
Thank you. Question to Bipin bhai. Now more and more people are starting businesses or likely to start in green zone, then orange, then red. and everybody has been advised to use these PPE, protective equipment. Start with just masks, take gloves. You'll have lots of sanitizer bottles and sanitizing equipment. We have to have a proper mechanism for disposing this. So at the cluster level, are you aware of anything how to manage this hazardous waste?
See, we already have an emergency response station where we give regular training to the industrial workers in our area or even from other areas. Now, as far as sanitizer or personal protective equipment are concerned, I think there are umpteen number of manufacturers and regularly that is being made available. So any training you need, it can be given not by only our emergency response, but there are quite a number of consulting firms who charge comparatively a very small fee, and they will tell you how it can be done.
If whoever wants to ask a question, you can unmute yourself and please ask the question, after which I will read out the questions which are in the group chat.
Any more questions? Kindly unmute yourselves and ask the question.
Mark Fernandez, would you like to ask a question?
Mark.
Hi, Anand.
Hi, Mark. Good evening.
Good evening. Sorry I joined in late. I was on another conference, but really very happy to note of the beautiful presentation done by Nitin under your chairmanship. It's a really eye-opening thing. The world is not going to be like it was before. And it's amply clear that Nitin has said that we should be able to project and plan properly till 2050, knowing the various tools that are available with the world today. But my question is, why is it, with all the technology possible in our capabilities, we always tend to fall way behind? I mean, we are never in a position to implement things which are environmentally friendly, which are human friendly, resulting in the chaos that we are today. Everybody was against a coastal road. We have now a coastal road. I mean, unfortunately, the people in power don't recognize the benefits that are from the technology available. And my question is, what can we as an industry do to change this? We have various zones, chemical zones, we have industrial zones. Ultimately, we are dumping all our garbage onto Mother Earth, and we are paying a much heavier price than we anticipate or we comprehend. Nitin, what do you think is a solution to this, where the industry and nature can flourish side by side, and we humans then live peacefully? Thank you.
Bipin bhai, Sandeep bhai, any one of you would like to answer that?
I would only like to say one comment to Mr. Mark. See, government many times starts with a very nice initiative. If you see you go back to 1965, so nicely it was planned, this Thane, Belapur area, entire left side for industry, and no commercial or residence up to 1.9 kilometer. Over a period of time, what they have done now, last year, they gave permission for residential buildings on left side MIDC area amongst the industries. Not even 100 meters from the industry also now, towers for residential buildings, 22-story, they are coming up. So over a period of time, I think they lose that motive, that initiative which the government had started. I think whatever we do, we should continue to do it, understanding the importance of that. Now, can you ever imagine that an industry, a polluting industry, a chemical hazardous industry, and 100 meters away, you have a 22-story residential building? But when it started, if you see the original paragraph when the chemical zone, Thane Belapur Road was started, oh, you'll fall in love with the government. But today what has happened? The same government gives permissions for 22-story buildings, as Mr. Mark says, coastal roads. So many things, compromises are starting after 5 year, 10 year, 15 year, 20 year, which I think should be avoided and should be stopped with some strong lobbies.
Thank you, Nitin. I would just like to elaborate a bit on it. I have been a director of JN Port from the day it was conceived till 2008. The plans are said beautiful. The greenery was beautifully laid out. But today, the government and JN Port is destroying all the mangroves which were protected, destroyed all the greenery on the hills which were protected. But we as an industry, we don't object. We don't, rebuke their behavior. And we allow them to go because ultimately we also want to have business operations, warehouses, and our complexes. So there should be a balance where I think we as a chamber should also play a more active role to see that when somebody is doing it. Today, believe me, it is the common man on the road who files PIL. No chamber has till today I have ever come across saying to the government, this should not be done. Look at the mangroves in JNPT being eaten up. Look at the new $2 billion by PSA going amok. I mean, growth, yes, but why can't we have another port? Why can just one area like the city of Mumbai? That's it. Sorry, it's an observation. But if you could throw some light that what can the chamber do? What can we do as a trade body?
We have to have a very strong lobby, sir, to make sure that this is not taken through. Because imagine already a notification comes and permission given for 22-story building 100 meters away from a hazardous industry. And we have to see like a silent audience, which is not correct.
True. Thank you.
We've got a question from Mr. S.K. Mitra. Would you like to ask the question?
Mr. S.K. Mitra?
I'll read out his question. What is happening, Sandeep ji, on the ambitious plans for smart city? Anything happening on the ground, or are they like just forgotten like many other projects?
If you're talking about the 100 smart cities and the Amrut and the other ground, there is a lot of work that is happening. But if you would look at the 17 indexes that are given, the word smart over there is more to do with intelligent infrastructure, more to leaning towards IT and IoT and ICT, rather than creating an enabling infrastructure for human index growth. And that part is missing. The reason it is missing is that the government got its priorities wrong. You see, today if you would look at the urban planning of Mumbai 2034, or you look at any town city planning, you are not able to today change unless you are bulldozing every aspect of it. You know what is the problem of cluster development, which was mooted, that you remove certain things and redesign it. You get into a lot of legal hurdles and other issues and aspects. So what the government tried to do is, because we are a signatory of the of the world, and in SDGs you have to show something. Then you start talking about a metro train. You start talking about building a statue, and you say that's a tourist attraction. Essentially, what they're trying to do is, as I said, the goal number 8, that is good job and economic growth. You are not looking at sustainability as an aspect. Mr. Rodrigues had a very fantastic question. Why said why like an IMC or why the bodies do not talk? The thing is that today, when I was trying to show the presentation, I do not know how many of you have ever been able to see a presentation where there has been you are reading those reports, because of your day-to-day work, you don't have time to look beyond your own businesses. So where is that awareness that what is going to impact you 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, unless you are having somebody to work with you? I will give you another simple example. You would see when we all have heard about the Kedarnath accident and the flooding and the landslide and the devastation. Why did it happen? We started creating hydel dams all over the Tarai region when the Tarai region has been already been considered as an eco-sensitive zone. And if you would take any of the dam and look at the engineer and the board of directors, you will not find a hydrologist, you will not find a geologist, you will not find a biospherist or an environmentalist within that board. So there is nobody to give the people who are going to take a decision what is that feedback. So if you are not taking a feedback from people who can tell you what the danger is going to be down the line, you are creating somebody who is a civil engineer. A civil engineer's job is not to understand what will happen in climate. His job is to understand steel and cement. So this is where every agency should understand right now that they need to not just have a decorative position called a chief sustainability officer, but finding a person, finding those people who actually understand what this biosphere is all about and give you the correct answer before time so that you can make the right decisions for your company.
Thank you. We also have questions. I'll just read out from Mr. Mathur. So he wants to know what are the flooding situation expected in Mumbai, because you mentioned about Mumbai and Calcutta, both the cyclone risks, high cyclone risks. What needs to be done as, prevention for, most of us are Mumbai based, so we would like to know from a Mumbai, Western India perspective.
The question is directed to whom, sir?
To you, sir.
Okay, sir. Hello, Mr. Mathur. The point is, when you are looking at what I showed you was if a cyclone hits Mumbai. So normally, if you would look at if you understand climate, usually the western coasts do not really in any part of the world have a cyclone hitting it. It's because of the rotation and the revolution of the Earth, the geomagnetic, it doesn't really hit. It is somewhere a freak of nature. If it hits, what could happen was the scenario. It was created there. The idea to tell you is that yes, climate change is spiking the atmosphere and we do not know. Last year, about 5 cyclones have happened in the Arabian Sea, a very rare occurrence. And the last one, which was Cyclone Ochi, which came in the Kerala coast, nobody had any idea that it will move in a direction inland, taking away lives of 450 fishermen, because usually it does not come inside. But having said that, Mr. Rodriguez again told that the coastal road, yes, it is an environmental hazard, but right now for Mumbai, it can be an environmental boom if the IMC so decides to take 2 of my ideas and implement. One is that they go and tell the government that you don't make the Shivaji statue in the middle of the sea, pouring so much of concrete and devastating the environment. Instead, take the statue, put it on the Elephanta Cave Island at the highest level, and it is already a tourist destination. It is already a human settlement. There are people moving around, and you can do it at a much cheaper cost. The rest of the money, try and make an embankment or a coastal road, what you are doing right now, around the island of Mumbai, all sides, not only the western side, all sides. So that will kind of be a sea wall. So if we are looking at a tidal wave or a storm surge, that can be taken care of. So that is something which we can look at, and we have to be very stringent when it comes down to the DP laws, like Bipin sir was saying, that you need to know that where the development zones are made for certain things, if illegal buildings have come up, you don't regularize them, you demolish them as was done by Supreme Court order in Kerala. So you just start demolishing them so that the rest of the Mumbai is surviving. Otherwise, there are slim chances of survival.
Well said.
There's a question from Mr. Kedarnath, which says, what kind of land use planning do you propose? This is Sandeep ji. In light of the shared flooding map that you shared, can you focus on one aspect and elaborate, please?
So if you look at Mumbai, land use planning has already been done in the DP 2034. So what I can propose is that the government, in 2015 created the NDMA, the National Disaster Management Authority, because they are cognizant of the threats of cyclone or flooding for a city of Mumbai. So land use planning are already there. What needs to be done is that we need to, all the people or at least agencies which are influential agencies like the IMC and others, need to sit with the government and see that they are being implemented in the way they have been designed. So then we will not really have any problem because people know what is to be done. People who have designed it know what to be done.
Last question, I'll just sum up a last question before we end. We've been talking about ease of doing business. On the climate side, on the smart side, what are the low-hanging fruits that you would say that we need to do on ease of doing business vis-a-vis smart cities?
Sir, can you repeat the question? Actually, you broke up.
What are the low-hanging fruits available to us today on ease of doing business index that planners, town planners can at both on the industrial side and on the residential side of smart cities? One on industrial and one on smart, if you can focus, that just look at making life easier.
Okay. So see, if you are looking at the ease of doing business, one first part is that it is a policy decision of the government where as a private person for us to give you a answer really doesn't work. But I can help you with one thing, that what you can do is you can align your business with the 17 SDG goals. Because those 17 SDG goals have a lot of pull of international finance, which the government of India is also eyeing. And the Niti Aayog has already created the SDGs as their vision document, and it is aligned with the Schedule 7 of the Companies Act. So when you align your business with the Schedule 7 of the Companies Act and pick up any one of them, for example, I will tell you the goal number 3. Goal number 3 is good health. Now, how do you achieve good health? You build hospitals, or you create today in today's contagion situation, like Anandji, you were saying, what can we create an innovative solution where you are safe in society or in an office? So you are creating a startup. So these are the things which, as an ease of doing business, the government will enable you. They will enable you. For EVEH, they will enable you. If you are trying to create a city like Magarpatta, and today if you are saying that I can create a smart integrated township, you can invite foreign companies and they would be more than willing to come today because China is no more an option. So these are areas where the policy document along with the sustainable development goals, if you mix it together, there is a chance of ease of doing business and there is a whole lot of scope.
All right, but due to paucity of time, we'll try and conclude right now. I thank our president, Mr. Vaid, who started with his welcome address. He gave a very new meaning to the acronym SMART. S for sustainable, M for management of waste to wealth, A for accessibility and affordability, for transport, rapid, mass, and practical in his address. Then we had Mr. Goswami, who took us the entire, entire world perspective on how climate and nature and human intervention is all of us. This statistic we've heard and read before about 2030, 4-degree change in temperature leading to about 2.5 lakh deaths potentially. About 7 million people being affected due to air pollution, and between anything between $2 and $4 billion of losses per year purely on the basis of climate change. Fortunately, every year due to either natural calamity, we get affected, be it cyclones, storms, floods, famine, and things like that. He did sensitize us on Mumbai, which is closest to all our hearts, and how we need to be more careful with large temperature changes, and he talked about the western coast of India, Gujarat and north of Gujarat being affected, low water availability in the years to come. After which we had a presentation from Bipin Bhai, who spoke about what they have done in areas in the cluster development, and how their focus over the years have helped them to restart businesses. Good interactive session with our speakers, both in writing and you on video. So with thank you all very much for attending this digital webinar, and we will circulate the presentation of Mr. Goswami, if it's okay, to our attendees. Thank you very much. And just one more thing, I'd like to thank the chamber, both Abhinav Chopra, the DG, Bhai, Sugoto Ghosh, and all the people who have made this event possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you and good night. Bye.
Good day.
Thank you.